He had a passion for Shakespeare.
A very gentle spirit, I think.
He's an icon and a legend.
He was very, very handsome in the classic way.
How moving he could be.
A man that broke barriers.
John can act anywhere.
He just never stopped teaching.
Deliciously, wickedly funny.
He's a very giving actor.
John Neville is a man of the theatre.
You know John Neville from Terry Gilliam's popular cult film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. You know him as the well-manicured man in the hit television series The X-Files. What you may not know is that John Neville is one of the most influential figures in the British and Canadian theatre of our time.
I was born in London, England, in a very working-class area. My father was a motor mechanic, and we were quite poor. I was a choir boy, which I suppose helped with my voice. The church warden said, I take my 3 nieces to Stratford every year. Would you like to come with us? And I thought, 3 nieces? You've got to be kidding. And I went. I saw a lot of Shakespeare plays in 3 years, and that was it. That really started it. When my parents took me almost every Saturday night to the music hall, which is when I started to learn about how people act on stage, even if they were just a singer or particularly if they were a comedian like Max Miller, for instance, who was incredibly funny and naughty. But he used his voice, and I ticked into that. I thought, that's interesting, because he doesn't do it's not all on one note, this comedian. It changes all the time. When I spurted out that I thought I wanted to be an actor, you would think these 2 Cockney people would say, oh, hey, really? No, they said, well, if you've got to do it, you've got to do it, but you better start practicing. So I started a drama club and got a very fine woman to teach us and direct us. This teacher said, well, perhaps you should go to a drama school. I had to pass an exam to get into the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And I was there for 3 years. They taught me how to breathe, which is rib reserve breathing, and I still use it. Mainly what you learn is the range that you get off being on one note, because there are many notes all of us can do, and you have to use them in order to make a play interesting. You take a breath in, here, and it's still there while you're speaking. Oh, for a muse of fire that will ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. So you can do a big bunch of Shakespeare with that, without having to say, I wasn't very good at RADA. I really wasn't very good at all. I tried very hard, but it wasn't good for me somehow. I didn't come into my own until I got out of there. There was a famous man who did a theatre in the park, Regent's Park, and it was always Shakespeare. And for some reason he got onto me and he said, I'd like you to join this team. He was vicious and terrible, but I learned a lot. And I was there for 3 years in this Regent's Park summer theatre in 3 plays, always Shakespeare. And then I started to really learn.
Like many British actors of his generation, John paid his dues in regional theatre. From 1948 to 1953, he performed in 10 plays in 3 months at Lowestoft, 9 plays in 1 year at the Birmingham Rep, and then 29 plays in 3 seasons at the prestigious Bristol Old Vic.
In those days, you would go to rehearsal in the morning, you would then have a break between rehearsal and the evening show, and you'd be doing a different show in the evening, and then you would come home at night and learn lines for the next day. So it was really hard work.
Most of the time, the actors never knew their lines until the last performance on the Saturday, because trying to cram it all in, and yet you did it. Now, I think if anybody said to me, I couldn't learn in a week, that'd be impossible.
Well, it teaches you how to learn a role with expediency. So it's a good teacher. The man running it was Michael Benthall. He took over that theatre which was bankrupt. His idea was to do Shakespeare. I was at the Bristol Old Vic at the time, and he came down and he said, I want you to come and join us. Oh, I don't know. I've got other things. And he said, well, Richard Burton has joined. I said, right, I'm joining. Mr. Benthall was a huge influence in my career. He was so good to me. It was my second year. He said, no, I want you to play Richard II. I said, no, I can't play that. It's a very important part and it's difficult, and no, I can't play that. He said, you will play that. I'm directing it, and you're going to be wonderful. Like that, he was like that, it was fierce. So I had to do it.
What must the king do now? Must he submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented.
Michael directed it wonderfully, and I had a huge success. And that was a very big point in my career, because from then on, got good parts. I was good at character roles. It's a discipline because you have to hold that character for an entire evening. You can't let it go. You get hold of that character. If you rehearsed enough with a good director, you've got it and you stick with it. Michael Benthall said, now we're going to play Othello. And I want you to play Iago and Richard will play Othello. A few days later, he came to me and he said, look, why don't you change over the roles once it opens? I said, no, I can't do that. Othello is a huge role, and Iago is even bigger. I said, that's enough for me. Well, he said, I don't know. He said, Richard has agreed to do it. Richard and I were very good friends. Next day I said, thank you very much. He said, what do you mean? I said, we're playing both roles each now. He said, Michael told me you were doing it. I said, wait till I get hold of Michael. So we played both roles. Played this night after night, changing the roles every night. It was a great experience. I don't think it's ever been done since.
They had a huge fan club, the two of them. And I remember going to the Vic as a student and seeing Henry V, when John played the chorus and Richard played Henry V. And the gallery was absolutely full of young girls absolutely screaming.
When I was a student in London, in the early 50s, I began to go to the Old Vic. And I became one of the Neville groupies as opposed to the Richard Burton groupies of the time. Striking looks, I think that was the thing that got me at that time. Yes, incredibly tall, incredibly handsome, that blonde hair, moved beautifully on the stage. John Neville looked traditional, but I think he had a newness about him.
They were matinee idols. Now that's a sort of very old-fashioned concept now, I suppose. Now what we have is film idol. And he would talk about what that felt like to him and encouraged it and nurtured it within himself because he knew that it was important. What he learned and then imparted to me was how an actor on stage must be sensually or sexually attractive to an audience on a deep, deep, deep level.
Outside that theatre, there were two lots of girls lined up. Crowds, right across the street. One lot for him and the other lot for me.
What'd you guys do?
We had to sign autographs. And we did. And then we went to the pub.
I have heard a quotation or a story that Richard Burton was once told. You can be the greatest actor in the English-speaking world, or you can be a household name. He obviously chose to be a household name. Have you chosen to stay out of films, or do you feel that?
I didn't choose to stay out of them, but funnily enough, we together had that conversation many years ago.
Well, Richard said, we're buddies, and I think that we should join together and share what we earn. I said, no, Richard, I can't do that. I'm going to stay in the theatre. You're going to do movies, and it wouldn't be fair. And he said, I don't care. I said, but I do care. I just want a career in the theatre, mainly. If films happen later on, that would be nice money. But I don't want to suddenly jump into a film career when I'm losing the things that I really want to do, which is the theatre, and particularly Shakespeare. I remember clearly when he died. I was playing Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, and I said to people who told me, I said, well, I can't go on tonight. They said, well, you must, the audience is out there. I said, no, I can't do it, I can't. But they coached me, and they were so good to me, And I went on and had a good cry afterwards. We were very, very close, indeed. 6 months in difference of our age, and we were buddies. And he died too young. She came straight from drama school. My boss was very proud of this.
And he'd said to me very early on, he said, I'm going to take an enormous risk and cast you as Ophelia.
And I said to the people who were running the place, including the boss, tell them she's a new actress. Don't say she's just come straight from drama school, because they'll kill her.
I felt like the luckiest person on earth, because that was my first professional part, and I got absolutely panned for it.
And she was wonderful as Ophelia, wonderful. In fact, we went on tour with it to America. She was terrific, but they didn't listen to me. The press jumped on the fact that she'd just come from drama school. They jumped all over her.
Michael Benthall and John really stuck with me through, I suppose, a very, very developing phase of mine where I had to learn a lot and get better at it. All I've ever learnt about the theatre, I learnt in that first year at the Vic. And I learnt it from John. Quite simple things like being on time and knowing the lines and doing your homework.
Well, I helped her. I helped. She was brand new, straight out of drama school, and I was now fairly experienced and in the Old Vic for quite a while.
I used to watch every night from the wings. It's just watching somebody being so disciplined.
He had terrific authority on stage, a very resonant voice, and tremendous physical control. There's this kind of stillness that draws your eye to it and gives an actor an authority, so that when he moved, it was moving for a reason and moving with a force.
Not many people know is that you also created the role of Alfie on the stage in England.
Yes, I did. That was a great surprise to everyone, because I'd spent 6 years at the Old Vic Theatre in London doing nothing but Shakespeare. They had a plan of doing all the plays of Shakespeare in 5 years. And I stayed 6 years, and I left after 6 years because I felt it was time I wore a pair of pants again. And one of the first things I did after leaving that was to play the role of Alfie, primarily because no one else wanted to tackle it. At the time, it was a pretty risky thing to do. I mean, there was an amazing speech in the play, which is part of the reason for doing the play, which is the description of an abortion.
It was quite scandalous and ex-certificate in those days, and quite shocking in what was essentially a comedy to introduce this very black scene, and there were lots of cluck-clucks and tut-tuts and disapproving, and but also it brought the audience in as well, this scandalous scene in this play. But what I remember most is John's performance, which was absolutely terrific.
I'd got old Ruby Zodiac, you see. Now, that's a car you can take anywhere. So I drove straight up in front of one of them big hotels where I've got lawns running right down to the river with little tables set out under trees on their own. I quite like anything like that at times.
Because he was such a very handsome man and his reputation had come from doing Shakespeare at the Old Vic, it surprised people that he could do this role, but in fact it was his family background was far more Alfie than it was Romeo.
My trouble is I've never yet learned how to refuse something for nothing, even if I don't want it. Well, what man has? It'll settle her little mind, I thought. Old Harry'll never know, and even if he do, he's got no right to begrudge me or her, come to that. He'll round off the tea nicely.
I had a Cockney accent, yes.
What does that sound like?
Well, he talks like this, you see. It's, you would talk like that. My father talked like that, and so I started talking like that, see?
Let's hear more of that.
So I had to get rid of it if you're going to be an actor, you know.
I went into the theatre at a time when working-class boys didn't do it. A generation later, friends of mine like Peter O'Toole and Albert Finney did that. But, as I say, a generation earlier, it just wasn't done, and I had to correct my accent in order to get into what I wanted to do, which was to predominantly do classical theatre.
It was at the Nottingham Playhouse where John Neville added a new and soon legendary aspect to his career as a theatre's head man, the artistic director.
Well, it's all combined, I suppose, and I suppose I was an actor for a very long time before I jumped into those other places. But I felt that I could give something.
I like Nottingham because it's tough. I've acted in some provincial theatres where the audience is dead. Here you get people going to the theatre who wouldn't normally go.
Nottingham was not a place for tourists. They were not high class. They were ordinary people who liked to go to the theatre.
John was a star, so to have John as a patron really meant something. In some way, I'd been acknowledged and brought into the fold. Perhaps there was some element of wanting to be the big fish and, you know, to be at the centre of his own constellation. But there was also a sense that he always wanted to create a kind of family and to be in a town where theatre really, really meant something.
What are your plans for the new theatre?
Our policy will involve doing the very best plays of all periods. It will not be a museum theatre in any sense of the word.
I consider myself to be very lucky to have come into the theatre at a time where I could work in repertory theatre and play lots of different roles, not necessarily typecast. And it was possible to do that in those days because there was many more repertory theatres, much more work available.
There was a time when you would come out of a drama school and you would go to a repertory company, and that's where you would learn and make your mistakes and learn what you do and what you don't do. These days, you see, you're meant to make some kind of huge success in television or on film immediately. So I don't know what anybody does now, where they learn anything.
Peter Ustinov started off being with me, but sort of disappeared, you know. So I've left pretty much alone with it. I was not that experienced in that, but I learned a great, great deal. I guess I learned quickly, because I'd been in many companies.
It was a huge challenge to take on. And in fact, he directed me in Richard II, as well as played the role. So not only was he running the company, he was playing the leading man and directing the play. So he had three hats on at the same time.
In some ways, John would give you the illusion that he could do it without a lot of hard work. And I think that there were many actors who thought that they could take shortcuts and thought if they stayed out late drinking with John and, you know, they could come to work and the morning with a hangover and he could do it, why couldn't they? Well, they couldn't. And he did put in the work. It's just he didn't show his hand.
I played Isabella for him in Measure for Measure, and we did a modern dress production of it. And of course, there's one point where she goes to the Moated Grange, and he had in his production, the Moated Grange was a nightclub. And he had somebody sitting there playing the piano, and there was I in a white habit as a nun. So I said, how on earth do I walk into this place at this time? He said, you must forgive me, Harry. He said, you walk in the way any nun would walk into a nightclub late at night, he said, after hours. I mean, that was at the dress rehearsal.
There's no point in me directing a play if I can't have a joke or two. It has to be some fun. And this makes it go well.
That's a totally unique person who can do that. Somebody who can be such a member of a company, somebody who can be a director, somebody who can then start and galvanise something to go, got the British Council to get us all to West Africa. You know, that was an unknown thing.
The Arts Council asked me to take a tour to Africa with the company. I said, well, I will, certainly, I'd love to take the company to Africa on one condition. And they said, what's that? I said, we have to play to black people. I stared at them. I said, I don't mind a few white people, but I go to Africa to play to African people, and that's it. Otherwise, I don't go. I went, though, and we played to black people. And it was fantastic. They loved it. They loved what we were doing. And I had a great time. It was a great, great experience altogether.
The heat was just fantastic. But it was a very, very exciting time, and they were set books that we were doing for all those schools in Nigeria and Ghana and Sierra Leone. And they were studying the plays, but they'd never seen them performed. So that was the most extraordinary time.
It was just wonderful to play to those people who were so eager for it. They didn't find it highfalutin or anything. They just were agog for it.
After 5 years of innovative administration that turned the Nottingham Playhouse into a widely recognized cultural centre, John Neville was unable to secure an increase in the Arts Council's grant for his theatre. His controversial resignation made the national press, and although he was urged to reconsider, he found that he was no longer wanted by the board.
From what I read in the papers, it was a bit of a rum-do. To me, you know, something's gone, sort of a great light's gone out, and that's it. Well, I thought John Neville was a very good actor, and it was a sad loss to Nottingham, indeed.
I think that when you resign from something, you resign, and that's the end of it.
Everybody who runs a theatre, you know, has a board to deal with. And I think that sometimes, you know, they are full of people who don't know how a theatre is run, and they dictate to you what they want to happen in the theatre. That's not right.
At heart, he was an actor who was happiest when out there commanding an audience. And anything that appeared to actually restrain his ability to run his company and to give priority to the actual work, I think he found very, very irksome.
Well, in the theatre, you have to believe in moving on, and things will be different, sometimes better, sometimes not. We met at the Birmingham Repertory Theatre in England. I think we were doing The Importance of Being Earnest, weren't we? He was very shy, and he was unbelievably beautiful. But I didn't know him. I knew all the rest of the company much, much better than I knew John. Growing up in the war, none of us had been able to travel, and we got this 2 weeks break. So I said, well, I'm going to Europe, I'm going to the south of France, and John was going back to be a good boy and see his mummy and daddy.
Daddy, yes.
Douglas Campbell was in the company with us, and Douglas said to him, no, you've got to go with Caroline, and I nearly killed Douglas.
I said, what will my parents say? He said, oh, never mind about that. So I had to go home and say, I'm going to the south of France with this girl. They were horrified.
There was a moment sitting on the beach when I thought, oh, I think he's rather special. And he was looking at me and I thought, oh, he's going to say something really nice. And he said, you know, your hair looks like very old hay. So romantic.
We came back to the theatre and we got to know each other even better. And eventually we got married. Well, we had 3 children to start with, and then we adopted 3 others gradually. Because of the horrid situation in England about coloured people, we just wanted to do that. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar.
He's been so lucky to have Carolyn in his life. And to have someone not in the business but understand the business, or in fact give up the business to raise their children and their adopted children and, you know, create that family home environment, which is, you know, hard to have when you're moving around.
I mean, there have been ups and downs. It's not been all honey and roses.
Really?
But, you know, we, after all, an actor is out a lot. It's been wonderful, of course it has, and or we wouldn't have survived.
Right.
And there aren't many marriages in our business that go on this long.
No,
I don't think.
If I'd been alone, I couldn't have gone nearly as far. She's been my wife, my mate, my fan, everything. She's been behind me and for me, and it's just magic. 57 years of it.
Must I go show them my unbarbed sconce? Must I with my base tongue give to my noble heart a lie that it must bear?
I love the English school of, let's just get on with it. You know, you don't necessarily have had to kill your mother on stage. You know, that sort of very anti-method. You know, it is our imagination. It is dress up. It is pretend. And John is very much from that school.
Well, there's a directness to it, and there's a clarity. Something in a great actor like John makes, I mean, I think an instinctive, imaginative decision is made, and it's there.
You know, speed up the thought process, because, you know, at the back of the stalls we can't see inside your head. So
he wanted people who could get out there and do it. Deliver the goods, you know? That's what John liked.
He would say an actor is someone who has a suitcase packed and ready to go. And you're ready to go anywhere and do anything.
It's kind of odd, but everybody says, why Edmonton? But then the answer can only be, why not?
I got a call to direct a play in Ottawa. So I thought, this would be fun. I directed the play in Ottawa, and I was about to go home. And suddenly I was asked to go to Winnipeg to be in a play by Ibsen. I thought, I've got to do this. And while in Winnipeg, I was asked to go to Edmonton to be in a play, and then I was asked to be the artistic director.
We didn't really have the right clothes or boots or anything. So I spent a lot of time falling over, but then we learnt how to.
Edmonton Citadel, it was a Salvation Army hall in a long hall with a stage at the end. And they said, well, it's not very good, is it? But we're going to build a new theatre.
It was this tiny theatre that seated maybe 290 people. And, you know, you all shared, there was one dressing room for all of the men. There was one dressing room for all of the women. There were rats in the basement. The heat didn't always work well.
Edmonton hadn't really had a fully professional theatre. And when John first went there, a lot of the sort of amateur actors expected that John would employ them. Well, of course, John didn't.
Everyone in the theatre community knew that for some reason which we couldn't fathom, John Neville had come to Canada and was taking over a theatre. And this was simply astonishing.
There wasn't an awful lot going on. There were some great things going on in some parts of the country, but the country as a whole had a very underdeveloped sort of theatre network, if you will.
What was wonderful about coming is I expected people to say, oh, you come from England, I suppose you're going to tell us how to do it, are you? Nobody said that. What they said was, God, it's so exciting you're here. When do we start?
John taught you at the old Citadel that the work counted. And what was amazing is in his time at the old Citadel, all the best actors in the country came to work there. They all wanted to work there. You know, John asked you and you showed up because you knew if he was going to be there, it would be good theater. It didn't matter if it was Edmonton in the dead of winter.
I received a call to if I could replace an actor as Claudio in his first production of Much Ado About Nothing, and so I said yes, and that was Friday afternoon. So I showed up Monday with these 2 little bags of mine and a box with string on it. They had already been blocking, so I ended up having to come on stage and do my first scene with John alone, and after having to say, Benedict, didst thou note the daughter of Signor Leonato? And I was terrified and breathless, but he was extremely generous and extremely there.
What I'd learned from my parents was very useful to me, that you don't just get on stage and act, you work. It's working. And I learned to work, and I learned later on to help other people to work properly.
We all have stories of John on a rampage, John mad at you, and sometimes you don't even know why, but you've done something that really annoyed him. Then he will turn around and defend you and nurture you, just as extravagantly 5 minutes later.
He demanded loyalty of people. If he felt that he wasn't getting it, then he could be very, very sharp and very, very tough.
I don't think there's anything he does that he would not expect you to be able to do as well, which means possibly you may not suffer fools gladly.
You wouldn't want to cross, John. It wasn't pleasant on the rare occasions.
He could get very, very like, let's get this right.
There was something sincere motivating it, but he felt to convince you maybe he had to be a bit theatrical.
You have heard my colleagues' impressions of the Soviet Union, and I'm sure they all satisfied you with their funny stories of the amusing hotels and ludicrous tourist services. Possibly confirmed all the prejudices you had on that country before you came here.
So I stayed there in this old theatre for 3 years, by which time we'd started to build a new theatre in Edmonton, a fantastic new theatre.
When he opened the new Citadel, the big glossy building that everyone came to see, and they wanted to see all the spectacle stuff, it was opened with Romeo and Juliet. Curtain went up, bare stage, brick wall, nothing. People were muttering.
And John came out with a hard hat, and I think he had a lunch bucket.
And I remember a bare stage and this very slim, tall, distinguished man on stage smoking a cigarette.
Puts a cigarette out on the floor, stuffs it out with his foot, and starts to recite the prologue to Romeo and Juliet. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we set our scene. And when he finishes, suddenly the wall comes up, the curtains part, and the entire giant 3-dimensional Verona street rolls onto the stage. It was John's way of kind of going like that to you. Ah, you little buggers, you came here to see spectacle. I'm going to make you see a bare stage and think you're not getting it, and you're going to listen to me first. And then once I tell you what the play is about, then I'll bring on the scenery.
When I arrived at the old Citadel, there were 7,000 subscribers, and it's now nearly 17. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, is quite a remarkable jump in 5 years.
Tonight's special report takes a look at the world of Canadian theatre. It's about a man who chose to turn his back on an international career in stage and film. Instead, John Neville turned to directing in regional Canadian theatre. In just 5 years, he made a box office success out of a once ailing theatre in Edmonton. Now he's doing the same thing in Halifax.
I had done 6 years in Edmonton, and I suddenly got a message from Halifax saying they wanted me to be the new artistic director. So I thought, well, this is it. I've done all that I can in Edmonton and have loved it, but this is a new challenge. They were also in debt, so I had to go.
He took over a theater that was again in terrible economic shape. The previous artistic director had lost money by trying a lot of stuff that was perhaps too daring or too commercially bold. It was an old building. It was kind of falling down to begin with. John came and thought, okay, we've got to just slap it around and put it on the map again. And the first thing he did was he put Othello on the stage with him as Othello. He kept a very high standard, brought in Tony Randall.
Tony Randall, I got to know him when I was doing something in New York. And he said, well, you're running this theater in Hamilton? Oh, I'll come. I said, oh, yeah, sure. He came for 3 years running, and it helped get rid of the deficit. He was a great guy, lovely guy.
One gets older, and I've had a very good time in the theater. I've learned a great deal, and I'm a good actor now, and I am now in touch with a lot of young people. I was in Edmonton. Some of them are here. And I get, again, a great deal of enjoyment out of passing on what I've got, what I've been given. I was fortunate in being given opportunities, in being given a craft or taught a craft, and I want to hand that on.
I think he was very much an innovator, and he certainly allowed young actors to take risks and take chances as actors and give young actors opportunities that in those days were very necessary. I think because of his programming, young actors back then were exposed to those classics that nowadays I don't think young actors are exposed to, certainly the ones that are out in the so-called regionals.
It took 5 years for Neville to single-handedly rescue the Neptune from bankruptcy. When government at all levels balked at his proposed building of a new theater, Neville was outraged and called them Philistines. In return, the Minister of Social Services called John a pompous prig with a gold earring in his ear. He's being cheap, parochial, and provincial, responded Neville.
In Edmonton, he managed to get the community behind him to get the new Citadel Theatre up and running. And I think he tried to do the same here and wasn't quite as successful, maybe because money here is a little deeper in the pocket, perhaps, than out west.
Well, I have to say that I had never, ever attacked anyone personally. It was not my intention to do that. I merely criticized government policy, which of course isn't done. But I think his comments said a great deal more about him than they did about me. I mean, what can you say about him? He displays all the jarring conceit and kindergarten cock-a-doodle-doism of an adolescent toddler.
He would make statements to the public, to the press, about how things were going in the theatre, and possibly, and be not to use the word rebel, unfortunately in this day and age has a different connotation, but he would be breaking barriers.
You know, he used to say, I don't want to rock the boat, I want to sink it. But he was just kidding, because he didn't want to sink the boat. He wanted the boat to be kept solid, the boat of theater to keep going, but he wanted to shake up, you know, everybody's kind of preconceptions.
While at the Neptune, John Neville wiped out the theatre's deficit. But in the end, unable to secure commitment to a new building, Neville did not renew his contract.
What does it mean for someone like you to become the artistic director at Stratford?
It means that I'm quite frightened. I have some temerity about tackling this huge job.
Is this the biggest theater job in Canada?
Yes, apart from that place on the hill in Ottawa. But we're better actors here.
Stratford was, well, it was an odd thing, really, because they were in huge debt, $4.5 million in debt. And I had to deal with that.
The artistic director does everything. Direct, hire the actors, hires the other directors, designers, board meetings, 12 committees, a lot of fundraising. You speak a great deal, attend to the gardens, pick the menu for opening night, choose the wine, sometimes act, and always you have to have an eye on the money. Yes, there are many hats to this job.
I wanted to do it so badly that I took it seriously, because it is a serious business. You're looking after the careers of other people than yourself.
Now, you've said that you may fail, but you have to take chances given the deficit at Stratford. But how many chances can you take with the board and everybody else breathing so hard down your neck? Do you then have to start going back and playing it safe and playing Romeo and Juliet again?
Well, I don't intend to do that. I mean, what I'm saying to you is that we have played safe and have a $3 million deficit. So what does playing safe do for you?
But what does not playing safe mean?
Not playing safe means excitement.
I think his vision for the company was to take it back to its roots, with the emphasis being on the plays, on the language, on the acting, on the company spirit again, that he'd incorporated into all the theatres that he'd run.
John was extremely brave and did Shakespeare plays that were not really popular, like Pericles, Cymbeline, and A Winter's Tale. And I thought it was quite dangerous, really. I mean, that could have finished it.
The British theatre audience also believed that you have to make some money. And there was always the tradition of either the Christmas panto or the end-of-season musical romp. So what John kept in the back of his head all along is you do all the great serious plays and then you do a couple of musicals to pay for them. And he always had that logic. He did something which no one had done on a large scale before, is he moved the musical into the big theater. And so he put in Boys from Syracuse, which was Comedy of Errors. And then the next year he did Cabaret, because he was doing a war season. You know, all kinds of stuff like that.
I was pilloried for it quite extensively. Yeah. But I persevered with it. We put a musical on the main stage fairly often. And it made money. Of course.
To make that go from a deep hole in the red to in the black was quite astonishing in that short period of time, because he didn't detract from the kind of plays and stuff that was to be done at Stratford, and neither did he detract from the quality of the work. That is a producer as well as an actor and a director.
In a plays in an organization like this, you know, everything comes from the top, you know, so whatever kind of person is running the show, it's eventually, over the years, it trickles down through the whole building right down to the stage door guy as to what is the atmosphere in the building. And with John, it was about family, but it was also about joy and also risk-taking and challenging each other. Somewhere over the rain.
One of the things that got me to join was that there was something called the Young Company, which was a little company of about a dozen or so people who were training, in fact, but they were also performing.
Ho! Do you ho!
It would have been easy for the board to get rid of that Young Company. And I said, if you do that, I walk. That Young Company is very, very important. It's the future of theatre in this country. They go off into the world, taking with them what they've learned at Stratford.
I was absolutely tireless in my commitment to the work. I never stopped working and learning and asking questions. And I think he recognized that too as a real commitment to Stratford itself, but also to the classical work. He was teaching me how to understand what are the priorities when you are putting your craftsmanship together.
I try to make actors find their own way to say something, with the inflections, you know. If it becomes so difficult, I may have to help them, but I prefer it if they find it themselves, because then it's theirs.
I think it was important to him for Canadians to acknowledge their own Canadian identity of the theatre, but also their own sense of the theatrical family. By bringing groups of people together, whether it was at the Neptune or the Citadel or here at Stratford, that he felt would work well and hard together, thereby sort of bonding the country.
I think he knew he could come here and be part of some sort of grassroots thing in Canada and create and enable and help grow a brand new, young theater for us.
Some people dig in roots and stay. John kind of comes in like this Bruce Willis-esque commando of the theater. And if there's a problem, he fixes it and then he's off. You know, Die Hard 4, John Neville in the theater. That's what it would be like.
After retiring from Stratford in 1989, John Neville rarely appeared on stage. His career was shifting to film with such major directors as Norman Jewison and David Cronenberg. He was also featured in television series like The X-Files, Grand, and Emily of New Moon. This widely influential man of the theater, who nearly 50 years before had declined to go to Hollywood, was now also a man of the screen.
Well, it's hard to put into words exactly what you learn from an actor, a great actor, an experienced actor. I think things just seep in.
If he is a great teacher, it's not on purpose, you know? I think he gets actors to think on the same page.
I just remember him laughing hugely about things. That is such an essential thing, certainly about acting, and I think about directing. I mean, if you lose your sense of humor and your sense of self-deprecation, you're lost, really.
The aristocracy that comes from that man, you see it and hear it, and when you talk to him, it feels of another time.
A real man of the theatre with huge integrity and passion.
He brought authenticity and humor and playfulness and a certain kind of knowledge that we didn't have from anyone else but him.
Without being endowed with his friendship and support and offered work by him, I think it's unlikely that I would have done what I've done.
By the world, I recount no fable. Some certain special honors it pleaseth his greatness to impart to Amado, a soldier, a man of travel, that hath seen the world. But let that pass.